Great. Thanks again for being here today, everyone. My name is Rihanna Putnam, and I'm the Community Engagement Specialist for the Citizen Science Association. I have just a few slides about the CSA and some housekeeping notes, and then I'll turn it over to Chelsea and Rachel to lead today's discussion. The Citizen Science Association is a member-driven organization that connects people from a wide range of experiences around a shared purpose of advancing knowledge through research and monitoring done by, for, and with members of the public. Our efforts are concentrated into a biennial conference. Our next one's going to be in May of 2021, a peer-reviewed journal, and member services such as our working groups, online networking, and webinars like these. Our membership represents the multidisciplinary and multidimensional nature of the field and includes project leaders, researchers, educators, librarians, and more. We're really happy to have so many of you here and learning more about the CSA. We have 9 working groups for the Citizen Science Association that explore cross-cutting issues like evaluation, ethics, environmental justice, data and metadata, and more. Our working groups are one of the key ways that we work to advance the goals of the CSA through the sharing of resources, best practices, and relevant information, both among group members and also to the broader citizen science community. We're excited to be reviving our education working group and expect that many of you might find connections and support there. So stay tuned for more on that. Our webinars are often led by our working groups, but occasionally, such as today, we invite other community experts to lead timely discussions. With all of our webinars, views shared here are those of the presenters and don't necessarily reflect those of CSA. This webinar will be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. You can find an archive of all of our past webinars on our website. And you'll also find registration links to any upcoming events that we have. This is kind of the last event that we have for a while. So if you are not already signed up for our newsletter, you can also find that on our website, and we'll keep you in the loop if there are any upcoming events coming up. There are a few ways you can help support free webinars from the CSA. One is by becoming a member. Membership dues are an important contribution to the work that we're doing to create connections across the field and support our working groups and others in creating quality webinars that they coordinate. If you're not already a member, now's a great time to join. You can find more information at the link on the screen. We also have a donation page that I'll link to in the follow-up email. And if you feel compelled to donate, your support is greatly appreciated to help keep these webinars free for those who can't pay. So we do have the call set up in meeting mode today, as many of you have noticed. If you would go ahead and double check that your video is off. We have everyone muted right now, but there will be time later, hopefully, for some in-person questions and discussion. So stay tuned for more opportunities for that. If you haven't already, you can go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat, and we can get to know more of you there. I think we'll have some polling questions so we can find out more about you in just a few minutes. And with that, let me scroll it back to the actual webinar one. I'll turn it over to Chelsea Krieg, who's in the English department at North Carolina State University, and Rachel Kramer Theodorou, excuse me, elementary faculty leader at Brandeis University. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
All right. Hi, everyone. I think Rachel's going to pull up our slides. So I'll just introduce myself a little bit. As Rihanna mentioned, my name is Chelsea Krieg. I'm at the North Carolina State University. I have an MFA creative writing background and experience in teaching first-year writing, which is predominantly what I'm going to be talking about today. So that's me.
Oh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself there. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name is Rachel Kramer Theodorou. Yes, the long Greek last name came from the other half of the family here. I teach at Brandeis University, which is in Waltham, Massachusetts, just a few minutes outside of Boston. I'm in the education program. My primary role is to lead elementary teacher education courses, but I also was an informal and formal science educator when I was in my K-12 days, and a teacher of English learners, pre-K through adult, and I still do that work. Yeah, and I'm excited to get started with you today. Chelsea?
So we just wanted to kind of set forth our goals for the workshop today. So hopefully all of us are coming from non-STEM courses perhaps, or maybe some of you are in STEM backgrounds, and actually Rihanna, this might be a good time to send out our poll to everyone, just so we can kind of get a better sense. So you'll see that poll, magic, Rihanna, it's great. Poll coming up here. So we have 2 questions for you. If you could just answer this poll really quickly and indicate your primary discipline, and also a question about how much you've used citizen science. Maybe you've never done it before, maybe you have somewhat, or maybe you have some extensive use of that. So go ahead and jump in there and fill that out. But just to kind of go back to some of the goals that we have for today for you, are to identify ideas for how to integrate citizen science into a non-STEM course, or perhaps a pre-K environment, an informal education environment, library, wherever it is that you're coming from. Rachel's going to talk kind of extensively about a suggested model. Some of you who are who are pre-service teachers or familiar with pre-K-12 formats will be maybe familiar with backwards design, which Rachel's going to talk a little bit more about. And then we're actually going to show you some examples of how we've used that backwards design to think through our objectives for our very different classes, and how we have actually incorporated citizen science into some high stakes and low stakes learning outcomes and possibilities and activities in our courses. And so we will explore a few of those options and then give you guys a little bit of opportunity, hopefully, to ask some questions and to engage with us and with each other. And this is just a reminder too, that there is a Google Doc, if you didn't see that in the chat, is it in the chat yet, Rachel?
No, I'll put it in there now.
Okay, let's drop it in there now. And then it came out with Rihanna's email that linked you to the Zoom call today. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or you can jump over into the Google Doc and put them there. And we'll be continuing to kind of keep that available as we go forward a little bit.
Right, and sorry, I'm just looking for my chat area here. I'm gonna plop that in. Feel free to populate this at any moment, and we'll get going. So, thank you. Any other housekeeping, Rihanna, while we're thinking of it?
No, I do have the poll results up. I'm not sure if we got a chance to talk about those, but looks like a nice mix of people on the call today.
Absolutely. I noticed that we definitely have a whole bunch of folks in informal ed, humanities, library sciences, a few teacher ed people out there. And it looks like we have about 40-some-odd% haven't yet had a lot of experience with citizen science. So this will be a good chance to start thinking together about the field. There it is again. Can everybody see those? Natural sciences still, many of you, even though this is the non-STEM coffee hour, but we'll take you, it's no problem. Great. So I'm gonna close that poll for now. And let's get started on some other points in our presentation here. Just gotta get the slides to move. Okay. So some of you know the work of Grant Wiggins and Jay McTighe, who founded the concept of backwards design. And UBD, which you see up here in the slide, Understanding by Design, was the program that sort of launched this category and this method of planning. And so I'll talk more a little bit about how I got started with citizen science, because yes, I'm a teacher educator, primarily elementary and ESL, English as a second language, and I mentioned a little background in the sciences. But one of the things that my partner and I at Brandeis thought about when we came together was that citizen science has such great potential. And sometimes the results and the reach is not as deep as it can be, and is not as well communicated as it can be. And you'll see in some of the resources, I posted a pretty interesting article about informal and formal science ed being more explicit about its intended results. And so backwards design really puts the results, the intended results, or the intended hope of the projects that you do in classrooms, and all of you, many of you are in higher ed, or if you're in informal science, you still have programming that you're working on. And then it sets up stage 2, which is how am I going to see the evidence of those results happening? And you'll see, I'll show you in a sec here, you can click when you get to see this presentation in your inbox. We have a doc here where I can show you what results look like, or evidence of meeting the results looks like. And then after you've set up your goals and the evidence that will show that your participants are getting toward your goals and are meeting the goals, and the more targeted you can get about that, the more specific you can measure the effectiveness of your programming, then you can leap into the fun and exciting programming that happens with your instruction in your programming. And the way Chelsea and I are going to talk a little bit about citizen science will help you understand how we set forth our goals early on and thought through them pretty deeply in order to see the effectiveness of the place for citizen science. So I'm in the chat, I put this link, and I'll just pop it up here again. My colleague, Colleen Hitchcock, and I developed this template. It really borrows straight from Wiggins and McTighe. And the orange course was a citizen science course, bridging advocacy, education, and science. So it was an interdisciplinary focus course where we explored the ties between education and formal and informal science. The blue template you'll see, or I think it's the blue one, is for my teacher ed course, and I'll talk more about that later. And Chelsea's going to talk to you now about the green template here, really in our slideshow. She'll talk to you about how her course was organized. So take it away, Chelsea.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I have sort of a humanities background, but I am working and learning right now in the teaching English 101, predominantly a composition writing course. And so I have this picture here, and that I wanted to kind of talk about to also kind of echo some of what Rachel was discussing about how I came to citizen science and how I'm thinking through utilizing that in my course. So when I first started teaching English 101, which should tell you a little bit about our curriculum at NC State, we were what's called a writing in the disciplines curriculum model, which basically works very well for a large STEM university. Some of you may be familiar with that same model. And essentially our task in English 101 and across all of our sections is to teach the academic disciplines rhetorically. So how does an article in the humanities versus the social sciences versus the natural sciences look? So for someone coming into that with a rhetoric background, a writing background, but not a science background, I sort of felt a little bit like this picture here with, you said do an abstract and an abstract painting appears. And of course, that's not actually, what we are doing in the natural sciences, but it felt a little bit, a little bit awkward at some points to teach, okay, well, how am I going to teach a natural sciences lab report or document as a non-scientist? So for me, coming into citizen science really was a door for me to help feel like I could use my strengths as someone who analyzes rhetoric, who talks about, the different audiences and the different choices that one will make in writing in a way that felt sort of real to maybe my strengths and the students' strengths by coming into it as sort of a citizen. So what I designed in my course for the natural sciences unit that I teach is what I call a popular accommodation and then a rhetorical analysis reflection. So essentially what that means for my course is it's popular science writing, essentially. So what I've had my students do is to participate in a citizen science project, research something that is connected to that citizen science project. So that may be topically connected. So let's say that my student is using an app, a citizen science app like I See Change. They might want to research something about climate change. And of course that can take a variety of different shapes. But they'll do that research, that work in the scholarly database, and then they'll start kind of connecting the pieces while also participating in that citizen science project. And what comes out of this is, a popular accommodation or a persuasive public science article that engages with scholarly research, but also it allows students to persuade others to participate in these citizen science initiatives that a lot of them end up feeling very passionate about, and as a means to sort of connecting to research outside of the classroom, and also to their communities outside of the classroom. And then they do a rhetorical analysis, so they sort of analyze the choices they made when they're writing, and sort of do a reflective piece about how well they are considering their new audience in the public science world, how they're taking information away from the scholarly articles and utilizing it for this new understanding. If you could go to the next slide, Rachel. So I wanted to kind of talk through, so that's sort of in a nutshell my assignment, but so now what I want to do is sort of take what Rachel was mentioning about backwards design and show you how I kind of applied that model to sort of create that assignment, but also to create low stakes things that I've done in the classroom that have sort of scaffolded into this. So even if you're not in sort of a writing classroom or environment, hopefully this will give you some, helpful tips for conceptually how to think through, taking your class or your workshop that you're leading, or that other informal education that you might be doing. Or I saw there's other people here that are representing first year experience, initiatives and programs. And that's sort of where I'm coming from here, which has been, and we'll talk a little bit about that later when we talk about some of the outcomes, but for first year students, this has been really beneficial. So you'll see here on the screen all of the objectives that we have across all of our 90 sections at NC State for English 101. So this is what sort of unifies all of us. I'm not going to read all of these out to you, but what I've done here is sort of color code them in green, because this is kind of how I started developing this project. Well, where do I see citizen science or this project kind of intersecting with some of the objectives that I have? So, things like learning basic principles of rhetoric, inquiry and writing across academic disciplines, these are things that I'm seeing my students do, or hoping that my students will do with this project. Next slide, Rachel. So this is the top of my my rubric. So now we've sort of got our large outcomes, our overall objectives for the course, but how am I incorporating this in a project? And I should mention here that because this is a writing in the disciplines course, this aspect of my course is a fourth of it. So, we go through the different academic disciplines, and this is one portion of my course that I've decided to use citizen science in. And this is also something that I think is important to highlight if you've never used, since we do have a lot of people who've never used it before. One, I started with a model that felt very comfortable to what I already did in my courses and thought about ways I could put citizen science in. So I was already doing some popular accommodation. I was already interested in popular audiences versus scholarly ones. I was already thinking through these concepts. So where does citizen science come in? So that's what helps take you from sort of your overall learning objectives. And even if you're not teaching a class, obviously, it's helpful to sort of, okay, what's the sort of end goal that we want to get out of this, and try to work backwards here. So, if I have these overarching learning outcomes, then how is this particular project going to sort of enter into that? So this is, like I said, just a portion of my rubric. But it kind of gives you an idea of how I am shaping this project around some of these initiatives. So focuses on information from at least one scholarly research article and one citizen science project. New text is constructed for a specific popular publication. So this is where we're thinking about audience in my class. We're thinking about the academic disciplines, how to do research. The article creatively and effectively employs a clear strategy for accommodating the reader's needs. So again, kind of thinking through that audience piece. And then the rhetorical analysis is about, that reflection. So taking some of those things from my objectives and thinking about the big picture. And then as I've actually linked out in that document that Rachel just shared with you all, a copy of my entire rubric for this project, so that you can kind of see, and as well as my assignment sheet, so you can kind of see all of the other components as well. But it's all sort of starting to build around what I have outlined in, or what I hope to accomplish in the objectives portion. Next slide, Rachel. And so now, the big project is in some ways, the easier part of, what it is that we do, sort of conceptualizing, okay, here are the big tests that we have, or the big writing assignments, or the big, presentations. But it's often the little things where, the little low stakes learning environment where I find in my class that students get, the most opportunity to really engage. So I scaffold a lot of reflection forums, a lot of small activities that build into these larger assignments, so that students can start to connect the dots a little bit. So I've got 3 examples here before I turn it back over to Rachel of just things that are at different stages of the process for this particular project. That really start to speak to these overall learning objectives. So this first one here is a reflection forum that I give right at the beginning of the unit. So I have my students watch Karen Cooper's very nice TED Talk, Citizen Science, Everybody Counts, which we've linked out in the Google Doc as a resource, as well as read an article called 2 Meanings of Citizen Science, because most of the time my students who are first year students predominantly are coming in not very familiar with citizen science, or maybe they have some apps on their phone that are citizen science that they didn't realize that they had. So this is a chance after they've done those activities to just sort of open-ended reflect on what citizen science is. Does citizen science matter? What is our responsibility to science? And so this starts kind of the gears turning a little bit. Why am I doing this? What does this have to, what does citizen science have to do with me? What does this have to do with the world I live in, the local community, the global community? And they get to really start to make those connections. This I find is really helpful for getting them sort of on board with starting to, again, connect those pieces. So the citizen science activity with the scholarly research article, oh, well, this citizen science activity, these citizen science initiatives matter because scientists are doing this. And so they're starting to slowly, connect those pieces a little bit. And they're also sharing, so that's another portion of this, is posting and sharing with each other and learning from one another about how, as Karen says in her talk, each of us takes the pulse of the planet. And so that is something that they all kind of, again, start to connect with each other, with the community they live in, and with how they might start to participate in this project. Next slide, Rachel. I think there was one in between there. Yeah, this is a second one. So this, and I know if some of you were on the assessment happy hour, or if, in our larger round table, we had some of these conversations about how do we, check, assess our students? How do we know that they're participating? So there's, there are some people who will collect data from the students, getting them to screenshot images that they've uploaded, or their, SciStarter database that they're using, or they'll actually put the data into different things. Those are all ways. For me, what I've found is more of a reflective way. So this is just another way in which you can kind of check their progress. How much have you done here? What did you do? What kind of materials did you use? How long did it take you? Have you had any setbacks? All of these things kind of give me a sense of where they are. And ultimately for the project I'm asking them to do, if they don't participate in the citizen science, that's going to become very clear in the final stages of this project. But this is a way to kind of help them scaffold in their timing along the way, and make sure that they're sort of keeping up to the sort of flow of things. And then the next thing that, if you want to change the slide, Rachel, thanks. So this is the last thing I'll kind of leave you with, and this is getting much closer to their final product. This is where they're starting to pull it all together, where I actually have the students do elevator pitches in small groups with one another, where they start to, bring in their scholarly article, they talk about their citizen science project, and I find that this is the moment where they get to get really excited about it. This is where the energy comes in. This is where they start to understand, oh, I'm going to need something more. I'm going to need my excitement. I'm going to need, you know, this actually scholarly data. I'm going to need all this information in order to really, quote unquote, sell the citizen science project to their group. So this is sort of a low stakes way in which they can start to scaffold into that bigger project. And what we do in these conferences is we have small groups where we all kind of give each other feedback and start to engage with each other on those different outcomes or places where they could, you know, grow their paper out of this small elevator pitch. So these are just a few examples of, you know, things I've done in my class as low stakes, you know, sort of activities that, like I said, kind of work with that backwards planning model, starting with objectives, moving to assessments, and then kind of getting into these learning activities where they're engaging with their scholarly articles, they're engaging with the audience through things like elevator pitches, and ultimately kind of building their papers or their experiences with citizen science into that.
Great. Shall I take the ball from here?
Yes, ma'am.
Chelsea, one thing, I think the slides doc needs to have permission. Mike was saying that there's a permission issue with that. So,
okay.
So just to let you know.
I will get on that. Thank you.
All right. So to move this along here, I'm going to speak about this from a K-12 educator's perspective, but I would encourage all of you to think of a theme that we're pulling through here, which is to say that both Chelsea and I had to get used to the idea that we too are citizen scientists, and we too are a part of this community, even though we are not directly steeped in the world of science from our own educational backgrounds or even our own positions at the universities. And part of doing that was trying to teach it and trying to be immersing ourselves in it. And so the courses that I developed along with my colleague, Colleen Hitchcock, who is an ENVS in bio at Brandeis, really were aimed at the sort of communal education of each other around this important vehicle to both learn as a human being, to practice your science skills and your science knowledge, and to work on your own advocacy skills as a human being in this world around citizen science and the topics that so many projects explore. And so, so my colleague Colleen and I got together, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago now, because I was looking for an elementary science content course that elementary teacher ed candidates could take that wasn't going to be a giant science lift and would not knock off some other things that they needed to do in their preparation to become teachers in Massachusetts. And we decided, well, why don't we just create this course that we're dreaming of? And so we created eBio 33B, which is really about merging the worlds of science, education, and advocacy. And we said, what are some of our shared, she explained to me everything there is to know about citizen science. And every year I teach this course with her, I learn even more, and I read, you know, yet one more paper that she's found and curated for us. And that's been really great. And just to pick up on another thread, I feel like I've learned how to read and write and study in the discipline of citizen science from my colleague. And so I think that we are a bit of a model for each other about learning different ways of seeing the same content. So what we aim to do, you see in our first slide here, is that we wanted to see forward the role of backwards design to both help individuals themselves understand the purpose and place for citizen science in whatever field, to then communicate about citizen science using backwards design models, and that's part of what you see on that other shared document, and to plan what we called applied demonstrations of citizen science in our community. So we had our individuals go out into our participants in the eBio course, go out and do citizen science projects with fellow students on the Brandeis campus and beyond. We had students come with us to the Museum of Science and to other events around the local area. We have our students participate in the City Nature Challenge. And they have to be facile at the language of citizen science, both what its purpose is, how do you participate, how do you get through the technological hoops, how can you publicize to others what you're doing, how can you follow up on the outcomes of the project. And it's been really exciting every year that I'm a member of this class and seeing these students grapple with what citizen science is and its potential is just a learning experience in and of itself. But this year we had a really interesting group in eBio, which was to say many of my education students there, not just elementary people, but I had secondary education people and I had folks studying education studies who said, you know, I'm just not a science person. So I'm here to take this class because I think it's kind of maybe a gut way to study science. And they found that that wasn't true. And they had plenty of hard work to do because we help them read and write and think and speak as though they are writing scientific information. And through both the shared experience, they all do an iNaturalist biodiversity blitz on campus. In past years, we've done like Christmas bird count or other related birding ones, Project Feeder Watch. But they really had to grapple with data and with ethics and with justice. In fact, we had a robust discussion about the word citizen. Do we need to be using the word citizen when we talk about this work? And so this year was really an interesting conversation amongst all of our participants about what it means to be a science person, social justice in science education. I start one of my classes. I teach 3 of the 13 sessions myself around education, and we explored our first science learning experiences and what has it been like to be a member of a science community learning science up through your college years. And these are undergrads primarily. And so they're still kind of looking at, well, I had to take a lot of tests and do a lot of lab reports. And they're critically examining the the opportunities and some of the lack of opportunities they had to grow their own science education. We looked at the promises of science, citizen science fulfilling the next generation science standards. That's what NGSS stands for. In Massachusetts, we translated those into the Massachusetts Science, Technology, and Engineering Standards. I'll speak about those in a bit. And with that, we looked at formal and informal science education around our campus, in the community, as a form of social action. And if anyone knows Brandeis University, founded on the morals of social justice and social action, this was a big hot discussion. And so we found lots of ways to weave in these themes and topics, which our students shared quite a bit during a number of different activities. They would post to a weekly blog discussion where we would assess not only the content, what they knew about citizen science, but also a lot of these themes had to be drawn through. And we actually have, if you ever want to see it, we have a rubric for blog posting that includes particular line items for citizen science knowledge, but also for being a good citizen themselves in a discussion. We had, as I mentioned, a shared application of practicing citizen science through one of the birding explorations and or a BioBlitz. And we had the applied demonstrations where students would go out into the community and coach other individuals to become, to practice citizen science and to see its potential. And then everyone ended the semester with an independent project. And I think this is where these themes came through the most. Each individual chose and participated in, collected data for, went through the data and shared results, communicated with the organizations that they participated, whose projects they participated in, and then shared the sort of so what. So now I've learned this about this particular subject area. What does it mean to me? And everybody had something along one of these bullets you see in front of me. Now I really feel like a science person, or now I really have a justice platform upon which I want to continue my work in bio. Or now I feel like I know how to teach this to young kids in the future. I just want to mention on the bottom here that I also led with Colleen some professional development, which included informal science educators, many of them, in how to use citizen science in their platforms, both with young people and adults alike. So moving right along. The second course that I developed was, and this one actually is going to continue to take a new role this year, was a science education course for educators, and all of these individuals you see here are current and growing students in our teacher education program. And we had to explore in this science education course, again, the longevity and the power of their own science learning. And this was yet another time where they had to go back and say, you know, how did I learn science? And was this a way that stuck with me? And how does this help me teach in the future to students? We tussled again with this notion of being a science person. And notoriously, elementary folks say, I'm not a science person, I'm not a math person either. And hopefully we are changing that narrative right now with this teaching science course that I have for my elementary candidates. We also explored social justice and science education. And so between Oki Lee's work in language and Chris Emden's work in the hip hop ed and other areas of science education, we looked at, you know, what does it mean to have an equitable format of education for all? And seeing the role of citizen science in that position, we were able to have a couple of visitors to our course from the local museums talking a lot about the outreach that they've been doing with citizen science projects that has been inclusive practices in most of their communities. And of course, we have to make a nod to the next generation science standards in our state, the Mass STE. And we looked at what rigor, relevance, and coherence, these are the three key words that our local officials keep speaking of when it comes to science education. How does citizen science have a role there? And so my students, in terms of the assignments, they spent a lot of time chatting with each other, both in class and through blog posting about, again, they would participate in various science projects and track their data and come together with new revelations and questions, and they had to justify in a pitch to their cooperating teacher, their mentor teachers, why they would want to do a citizen science project that relates to a current form of education, a form of science education in their classroom. Then they had to try out a citizen science project with young people in their classroom or in their world. And of course, this year with the COVID crisis, they did it just themselves. Still, I heard through their blogging afterwards the overwhelming excitement that they have about this format. And two of our educators actually wrote, and these were some high school educators I was also working with in this course, wrote some units for embedding citizen science into high school chemistry courses, which was really exciting in the end. And a lot of that stuff is on the backwards design piece that, that we shared. So again, these were some of the goals that I mentioned in that pre-K to 12 classroom class, but my students came back with a bunch of different ways in which to justify how to use citizen science in the K-12 context. And like I mentioned, they participated in the City Nature Challenge. They explored the role of it and the potentials in all K through 12 science education. They talked a lot about the science skills. We had a couple of forums where we just talked about what was it like to actually go up to a species and snap a picture? Was that frustrating? Was that easy? How would you imagine doing that if you were with a 7-year-old, a 12-year-old, and a 16-year-old? And we talked a little bit about how do you cultivate patience and energy and excitement for observation and collecting data. There's a great turtle unit. It's a local unit. I won't get into it too much, but folks can ask me about that from Zoo New England on Blanding's turtles. And I just want to make a nod to the California Academy of Sciences Citizen Science Toolkit. It really, for me, was when I was first studying this form of teaching, was the tool that sort of expanded my notion of where and how this world of citizen science was going to fit into teacher education. And so that is linked here and also on your document, on your shared document. So we're at the point here, Chelsea, where we're able to do a little bit of sharing about our outcomes, or we can also field some questions. I would say, just to wrap up my piece here, that The outcomes are still pouring in, quite honestly. I was actually, even in this time of crisis, when I asked my students to participate at home in their own hometowns with the CNC, the City Nature Challenge, they were out there snapping pictures and posting things on the forum, and so excited about the potential, especially in the online environment that we're in right now, to take many of the projects that they find on SciStarter. They all have to explore SciStarter, Caroline. So, and find and bookmark projects that would be of interest and potential. And they had a wonderful banter about, this would fit in this unit, but maybe not in that unit. This would be great with this age group, but maybe not that age group. And so I think that the fire has been lit, and I think that's the primary thing that I would say is a major outcome from my work. What do you think, Chelsea?
Yeah, I wanted to sort of echo that too. The students are very engaged. I think it really gives the students a sense of community that moves beyond the classroom, regardless of however you incorporate it. You know, to go back to sort of my experience with first year students, they crave so much that community. And right now in our time when, you know, many of our classes, our programs are going online, I agree with Rachel that this is a way to create that community in the time of sort of the online social distancing environment that we have, that you can do that still with citizen science. And I have students, just sort of anecdotally, also who are still using it. I had a student write a great paper comparing eBird to Pokemon Go, which was particularly wonderful, and she's still you know, catching them all, and still using eBird. I have students who, I have a student who changed her, who came in as exploratory studies and really through doing citizen science became engaged enough to declare her major as conservation biology. And then thanks to Caroline's work and other folks at SciStarter, I have students even publishing some of their papers that they write in my class. I was talking to Carter today, Caroline, and are actually going to get them outside of the classroom and into the world, and hopefully connected to citizen science initiatives. So, so you know, the outcomes, as Rachel said, they just keep pouring in. You know, I got an email yesterday saying a student was doing an internship that utilizes citizen science data because he learned citizen science in my course. So no matter where you are, you know, incorporating something even in a small way can have a really big impact, I think, on the students in a lot of different ways. And I know we have a question here, Rachel, that maybe you want to address from Stephanie about, could you talk a little bit more about your involvement with citizen science and social justice? So I don't know if you wanted to.
I can, and there's a hand raised as well. So we'll get to both of these questions. Quickly about social justice. So 2 angles. First of all, in our Master of Arts in Teaching program, we start and spend our entire year talking about working towards social justice, working at ourselves and our understandings of justice in teaching, justice in education, justice in the educational world. And so all of the time in every course, there's a piece and a place for really talking about identity and diversity and equity. And in the teacher ed courses, the way we look at this is how have you been shaped as a learner of science, and what have been the factors that have influenced that? What was accessible to you, and why, and how, and what were the circumstances that created that possibility? And we also look at disciplinary language, disciplinary writing and speaking. I'm an ESL specialist, so I talk a lot about what does it mean to read, write, speak, and think in the disciplines. We looked at some of the barriers to that, but also we look at what could be more equitable practices around science education, looking at translanguaging, looking at bilingualism, and looking at all of these potentials. Another thing that I put in the doc, I found on the University of Wisconsin Public School of Ed, Department of Ed, excuse me, has a wonderful scientists from around the world, diverse scientists from all nations that you can think of, and their projects. And so we talked a lot about what does it mean to have equal representation in the sciences. And we do both introspective, how has it been for me and my growth, and how will it be for your future students? In our eBio class, which was again a mix of people in the health policy and politics and science and education, we had two people come from organizations in Boston that were both citizen science organizations. One was mapping hotspots in the city, and we looked at what does it mean to have social advocates amongst our community working together towards more just solutions for mapping heat and green space and other things in cities. And the other project was called Noise in the City, which I don't think has continued, but it was a great project looking at how in urban planning communities are involved together as citizens to both do the science and map the noise and or the heat and come together to affect policy. I have to say it entered into pretty much every of our conversations last semester too. If that doesn't answer your question, I'm totally happy to go on and email you privately, but let's hear from our participant here.
Yeah, I wanted,
or do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a quick thing about that too, that, to kind of echo from the urban planning standpoint, Harlem Heat Project and I See Change are ones that are specifically kind of exploring economic divides and how that, can affect access. And so something like the Harlem Heat Project is essentially measuring indoor heat environments and sort of drawing attention to the fact that, different economic classes are the mortality rate is higher because they don't have as much access to things like air conditioning in certain locations in the U.S. So that's one that I know of too, that's specifically engaging with social justice. And from my standpoint with public science writing, that's something that can be certainly helpful, especially in our current moment, and in really every moment it seems that we need more communication about things like this. So it can be a real bridge and very eye-opening for students or any participant, I think, who's involved in any way.
Fred has a question. Fred, would you like to share?
Yes, thank you. This whole series has been incredible for me from a number of different perspectives. I'm a science librarian with a background in biology and zoology and about, 45 years worth of environmental work. I was just wondering if any of you have had any contact or communications with the North American Association for Environmental Education and your state environmental education or outdoor education association. I've been affiliated with NIOSA for the New York State Outdoor Education Association for a long time. Going back to when I first became a librarian 38 years ago with issues of acid rain. And Paul Godfrey did some great work on verifying the accuracy of citizen science with the acid rain work that he was doing in New England, 1985 or so, and had several great reports that were written. And I was just curious to know how you go about soliciting your STEM faculty members to do this.
Yeah, I can answer some of those questions, Fred. So thanks to Colleen Hitchcock, who some of you may know. She has vast networks in the New England area and beyond of informal science educators who come to campus. So our eBio course, and I've borrowed some of this into my teacher ed course, and we also borrowed some of it into our professional development course for teachers, was structured in a hybrid way. So we had online outside of class work that would be posted throughout the week. And once per week, we come together for a recitation, and it was always led by an informal or formal science educator from our community. And so we had folks from the Museum of Science, we had from the Boston Harbor Islands, we've had from the EPA, we've had people from the New England Aquarium, from the local zoo. And each of these people have their own degrees and their own scientific backgrounds, but all are somehow involved in public and broad informal science education. And we schedule them to match up to the themes in our course. So if we had someone talking about ethics, so we had Erica, I'm forgetting her last name, from Noise in the City, who came in during our week on justice and citizen science. and we might have someone else when we're looking at data, probably someone from the EPA, now that I think about it, came in and sort of approached the topic of the week with their particular area of thought. And so does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. And the other aspect of this is I have been asked to consider teaching a course in our 198 and 199 seminar classes that are based on a transdisciplinary perspective of looking. I think they're limited at 25 students per class, and you could very easily have 20 different departments or programs represented as students in that. So it's putting people from various disciplines into the same classroom to address the same problems, issues, and solutions. And the overriding thread through all of this has been how easy it would be to use citizen science to teach a class like that, even if you were going to be doing it with, like, say, 4 distinct issues of using citizen science as a means for when you look at the citizens of that class, and how would that eventually relate to the students going back into their own departments and then using that knowledge and saying, what can we do to keep this idea alive of generating citizen science concepts in other avenues?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really great point, and that's something that I've experienced in my connections with students, because they either haven't declared majors at all, or some of them who have are in all kinds of different areas. And I think citizen science really is a great unifying tool that allows you, and it really, depending upon how you shape your projects, it allows the students to shape it, you know, the way they want, or the way that their discipline would approach it. So I see that as being incredibly valuable, because you can take something like climate change, right, and look at it from 60 different viewpoints, and use the same app. Or you could, you know, use eBird and talk about birds migrating, but use that for a lot of different perspectives. Or, you know, there's all kinds, I mean, of course, there's all kinds of different citizen science projects. So, you know, and I think that kind of, in a way, dovetails with a question from Caroline that's in the chat and also on the Google Doc, which says, it seems like citizen science is a particularly good fit in writing reflective classes. Do you think citizen science could cross over with political science or history courses? How could you foresee this happening? Also, what techniques would you use if students seem skeptical or reluctant to participate in these activities? I think that's a great question. I definitely see this as, you know, political science, history. History, I mean, you can look at sort of historical representations over time, particularly when if you're talking about something like urban planning, how have our spaces changed? You know, how could we integrate some of these citizen science? And the other thing, Rachel and I have been talking about this, is citizen science isn't just limited to natural sciences. There's a lot of anthropological citizen science projects out there. One of my students did a really interesting project, I'm forgetting the name of it now, where it was about, it was some sort of forensic anthropological project where you count the teeth in your mouth and you sort of measure where the positions of your teeth are, as a way to sort of look at how humans have changed over time, and, you know, connecting those things with these larger, you know, these larger frameworks. I mean, I think that's the nice thing about citizen science is citizens, you know, we're all citizens, and we're all, you know, we're all involved in you know, in science in a way. And not to harp on Karen Cooper's TED Talk, but she kind of mentions that in that talk, that, you know, especially now that we're all sort of plugged in, even more so now than usual, you know, we are, you know, even if we're tracking our sleep patterns on our phone, or we are, you know, looking at our, you know, we have some app that's counting our steps, or we're taking a picture of a plant we see and trying to get somebody to ID it for us because we know nothing about plants, you know, that kind of thing. I think that that's the nice entry point there. And in terms of, you know, skepticism, and I don't know if you want to jump in on this too, Rachel, but I have had very little pushback from students. I can't think of any pushback at all. I give them the flexibility of choosing a project, and I really emphasize choosing something that they are interested in and passionate about, which I think is, you know, something for freshmen very exciting, because they're used to just having to you know, think to the status quo. And so I push them toward finding, and so we do a lot of work with the sort of pre-writing, brainstorming to make sure they choose something that fits well for what they want to do with it. If you're in an environment where you know you want to deal with this one citizen science project, and I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more to that, Rachel, that may require some other massaging. So did you want to jump in on that?
Sure. I mean, I think a couple of, maybe I don't know if this is exactly where you and I were connecting on this point, but when it comes to connecting to other disciplines, we have a major at Brandeis called Health Sciences and Social Policy, and a lot of universities have something around health policy, and you know, it's an interdisciplinary major. So we had a student this year who was a senior, brilliant student, real leader in all of the discussions, despite having, you know, being more of in the advocate of our, we consider our class having 3 basic constituents, folks who are in the field of, quote, advocacy, and that includes ed studies, politics majors, and HSSP, and other people who kind of are in this aiming to be in the advocacy or in the policy side of the world. We have our science people who declared, usually biochem majors headed to medical school. And then we have our educators. And so this person came in as a senior, didn't know what she wanted to do with the rest of her life, was feeling compelled to be somewhere in the health sciences field, but not sure where. And she fell in love with the education side of this, the fact that citizen science is an educative tool. And so now she intends to be an educator in either museum education or in the health world. But she's really found that she participated in a citizen science project that was tracking women's health symptoms. And she found that she herself was experiencing some of the things that she was tracking. And she wound up writing an article for their journal and being a part of their package of outcomes from their particular project, which is an ongoing project. And I think she may even go and work with them next year. So, you know, there's all these really nice stories that come out of these. I will also say, though, on campus, there are a lot of, I think that's right, Caroline, thank you. There are a lot of on-campus initiatives, a lot with librarians. So our librarians have been super active in the citizen science work on our campus. Thank you, librarians.
Yes,
so
thank you.
They're hosting citizen science lunches. Some of our students come and support them. Our students are learning, you know, sometimes for credit in either 2 credit or 4 credit ways. I'm on a committee right now looking at community engaged learning and how we can start using citizen science as a model, as a platform to practice the skills needed to be a communicator to the public about a big thing that has many intricacies. That's really kind of one of the reasons why we went with backwards design, to start helping flesh out those intricacies. So, so anyways, our librarians are running these great citizen science lunches and events, and then become co-leaders in the work on campus. Which we see as the way that the longevity of these projects exist. We still have people posting to BioBlitzes that they were in classes for 4 years ago. And it's pretty exciting to see some of that work continue to grow.
Yeah, I also wanted to add quickly too that, and I know we're about out of time here, but I think not to underestimate the emotional side of what citizen science can offer students. I think that's really important to highlight here. You know, of course, the humanities scholar would bring up emotion, but I think that that's really an important thing that we want to think about here in terms of that, because, for example, you know, there's lots of citizen science. I mean, a lot of people have anxiety about, you know, COVID-19, what's to be done about that, and this is the way that they can feel like they're doing something. I think many of us are sort of spinning our wheels, feeling like we can't do anything. But you know, there are citizen science projects like, you know, Fold It, that are actively engaging in research for COVID-19. There's also lots of things, you know, Stall Catchers is one of my students' favorite because it's a video game and it's doing Alzheimer's research, and many of them are in the middle of experiencing a loved one who has passed or is dealing with Alzheimer's. And so I think that is also an important thing to kind of consider here. If you have pushback, is thinking about engaging their emotions and what they care about, and how you can help them, find something to connect them into, whether that's social justice or, the current, social moment.
I was just, before we end, I want to throw in there, if any of you have pre-college programs or teens who are excited about this kind of work, we have found, and we've been working with the pre-college programs about having a citizen science project be part of their summer work that they do on campus or in other pre-college experiences. And I know the New England Aquarium has a great program. You can take a look at their website and others. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great, and I just want to chime in here because we are at the top of the hour, and just to thank our presenters and to thank all of the presenters in this education series. This has been a great series of 5 events that we've hosted, and if you've missed any of those, you can find those recordings on our YouTube channel, and there are some supplemental resources that go with that, and so reach out if you missed any of those and want some of that. Yeah, and we hope to catch you again on a